Welcome back to On the Move with Victor Shi. This is still Victor Shi. It's Tuesday, January 10th, 2023, and I'm coming to you one day after perhaps Kevin McCarthy's biggest test as Speaker of the House, or should we say Speaker in name only, which he was able to pass, and that is passing a rules package. But the rules package has a lot of concerning things in it that I think should raise alarm bells to all of us who want to see a functioning Congress that actually legislates and improves all of our lives. We're going to talk about all of that, what's in the rules package, what it says about the Republican Party, that all but one Republican voted for it, and what we should expect in the coming months and years to come with the Republican control of the House. I'm very glad to be joined by Galen from the Lincoln Project and a veteran of many, many political campaigns, and is really an essential voice in this effort to protect democracy and elect more pro-democracy and responsible people to government. Reed, thanks so much for joining. It's great to see you in person, or not in person, but virtually, I guess.
Right. Thanks, Victor. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So let's first start by talking about the rules package. I think there's many ways to look at what's in this, but I want to start just from a procedural standpoint and really the lack of power that Kevin McCarthy will have after passing this rules package. We've heard the term speaker in name only, but how much does that ring true after the rules package was passed yesterday?
Well, I think it just codifies, in I guess, I don't want to call it legislation, but in House language, that all of the things he promised to all of the nuts in his conference. And remember that 132 of the 222 members of the U.S. House Republican Conference voted to certify the 2020 election on January 6th, 2021. And so now you're going to see people like Mark Green, who is chair of the Homeland Security Committee, the Rules Committee, which is basically the body that decides what legislation comes to the floor and what the different pieces of it are. These are all going to have very Freedom Caucus MAGA influence on them. And with what they call the motion to vacate, I think now down to one member, that means that any member on the floor can say, I don't think that Kevin McCarthy's a very good speaker, and we should vote him out. And so I think that all of that stuff boxes McCarthy in. But let's be clear, I don't think he cares. Who is the first person at 1:30 in the morning that he thanked for their support after the win? It was Donald Trump. In the House Republican Conference, I think, Victor, is very representative of the broader Republican Party right now.
So let's take that one vote of no confidence measure. What would happen if that's invoked? I mean, Kevin McCarthy, basically, would that mean that there would be a new speaker election, or what would happen if that happens? And does that benefit Democrats more than Republicans? And should they take advantage of that?
Well, I mean, it would probably not come from the Democratic side of the aisle, but if they thought that they could oust him, the Democrats, that is, with 4 or 5, remember, there's only a 9-seat majority. So as soon as Kevin loses five votes in something like that, theoretically, he'd be done for. And, then you'd have to restart the insane process. And I think that's the broader point of this, too, is that it just opens the door for a year, maybe 2 years of chaos. And that's really what these folks are looking for. Matt Gaetz might be persona non grata amongst his own conference now, but he loved the attention. Yeah. He loved being in the well. He loved being on camera. He probably raised a ton of money on it. And, these are people that they don't care about committee assignments, right? It's not like the old days where it's like, oh, yeah, I'm in charge of the House subcommittee on intelligence or, whatever, military thing. So therefore, I'm going to get all the money from Boeing and Lockheed and everybody else and the insurers or whatever. They all just care about, pushing this crazy authoritarian movement forward. So it's a much different thing. And I think, Victor, this is really important for your viewers to understand, is that the world that we knew, like in 2015, is gone forever. Right. Yeah. This is not the Republican Party I grew up with. It's never going to be. These are people who don't care about how things are supposed to work. And the result will be individual Americans being hurt.
Right. And it's the party that young people see now. I mean, we see this party not through the lens of traditional conservatism or that they have any policy, but that these are people who just seek power, want to please Trump. And I think we saw that with this rules package. There's some revealing things about, I think, how much Republicans have abandoned any sense of principles, namely with that defense spending being slashed, I think, at 10% over 10 years. And so, reasonable mind can disagree on that. But for Republicans, that's been a pretty big issue. Talk about what this rules package tells us from a policy standpoint does the Republican Party care about policy anymore? Or is it mostly what you just said, launching investigations and doing things that, frankly, probably no American really has any appetite for?
It's all performative.
Hmm.
And that's part of the deal here with authoritarian movements is it's all about power. The interesting thing, though, Victor, is that to push their agenda forward, such as it is, or their insanity forward, they have to intentionally tank an economy,
Hmm.
right? They have to, make sure that jobs are not growing at a historic pace. They have to make
Yeah.
sure that the stock market falls. That they have to, you know, default on the government's debt, through a debt ceiling fight. So that everybody's insurance rates go everybody's borrowing rates go up, and at what expense? Okay, we'll give you a rules package, excuse me, a deal on the debt ceiling, but we want you to cut Social Security and Medicare. Like these are people for whoever, for the American people, it's a catch 22. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. And again,
Yeah.
remember, they don't care. So what does the rules package mean? It means that it's codified a lot of the stuff in writing, and in spirit,
Mhm.
that a lot of these members were demanding. And remember, again, going back to the 20 people who held up McCarthy's speakership the most, they were the most vocal, many of whom just don't like him,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
he is of the establishment. He is not a true MAGA guy. They know that. They don't trust him. They don't like him, right? But they will use him as a tool. Again, he's happy to be used that way. But let's be clear, whether or not it's McCarthy or Gates or Gosar or Green or Trump or DeSantis, they're all the same person. They're just different shades of it.
Mhm. Mhm. That's super interesting. And I want to go back to something that you said about how, I mean, part of the Republican strategy is a bad economy and that they are so willing to slash things like Social Security, Medicare, just to, I guess, maintain power. But I want to ask you about that. I mean, what is kind of in the Republican Party that tells them that that is popular among the American people? I mean, you see things like just even other issues like reforming our gun laws in this country. I mean, you have basically every Republican voting against common sense gun legislation. Is there something that we don't know that the Republican Party knows, maybe in internal polling, that this is popular among their base? Or, I mean, they must know that this isn't very popular among the broader American electorate, but why do they still do it?
I think you have to take this is all about uh, revanchism. This is all about a majority white party,
Hmm.
and its
Hmm.
base members seeing that the world is moving on and they're unhappy about it.
Yeah.
For them, Victor, we have to understand this too. The fight that MAGA is waging and its base supporters are waging, to them, it is existential. They believe their way of life is as at a crossroads, and if they don't fight for it in every possible way, it will end, and they can't imagine that. And so,
Yeah.
you talk about, Republican voters, they vote against their own self-interest. They do, because their self-interest matters, but also they are so in the bubble so much for this stuff, right? Whether or not it's Fox
Mhm.
News or
Mhm.
OANN or any of this insanity, all they want to do is look down on somebody else. It was
Right.
LBJ who said,
Right.
every man a king who has somebody to look down on. And that's how they see it. This props up an old, 1950s view of the America that didn't exist then and certainly
Right.
doesn't
Right.
exist now, right? Like Leave It to Beaver, like that wasn't a thing. There's a reason why it's called fiction, right? That wasn't how
Yeah.
America was then. It was a very dynamic decade of anything else. But that's the sort of gauzy haze that Republicans have chosen to put around it, but not in the positive of like it was a time of growth, it was a time of great expansion. People were in charge, right? Man was man, woman was woman. Everybody knew their place. And this idea of individual freedom and liberty, which was such a keystone of the
Mhm.
old
Mhm.
Republican Party, has now been transplanted by monolithic government control. And look, a lot of these people are not small d Democrats. They don't believe in democracy. They believe in
Yeah. Yeah.
authoritarianism. They believe in a strong leader, and they'll do what they can over the course of the next 2 years to set themselves up to make that possible.
So, against this backdrop, I have one final question to you, and that's how do you think Democrats should be responding to this, not only in the House, but also to the public? I mean, they're the minority party in the House. What should their strategy be in pushing back against Republicans there? And then what should their message be to the American people heading into 2024?
Well, look, I think one is, giving credit where credit is due to President Biden,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
He has had an extraordinary first 2 years in office by any even objective measure. I think falling into the idea of like this first bill that the Republicans put on the floor, slashing funding for 87,000 IRS agents. Like that's a trap for Democrats to get caught in, to say, no, we want 87,000 IRS agents because we want your taxes to go up. We want them to attack you personally. Just go, this is ridiculous. It's never going to happen.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Anytime it comes to taxes, the only thing we know about Republicans is they want rich people to pay less and they want you to pay more. And so, just not getting caught in the culture war traps and the little traps that Democrats unfortunately tend to get caught in. And then just continuing to point out, again, where the country was 2 years ago, where it's headed now, and what these people will do if given the opportunity.
Exactly right. Reed Galen, thank you so much for joining me today. It's always great listening to you and seeing your content. Thank you so much for your voice.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, that was another great episode with Reed Galen, who I think really contextualizes and crystallizes where this Republican Party is. There's a few great pieces of news actually from this morning, and also some maybe bad pieces of news. But first, just to start off with some good news, we saw Representative Katie Porter announce her candidacy for the U.S. Senate right before we went live, actually. So she will be running for the U.S. Senate to be senator in 2024. And I think that will be the replacement of Dianne Feinstein should she choose to retire, which I think that it's time for her to retire. I think Dianne Feinstein has had a great time in public service, really representing California. But I think it's time for a new generation. I think it's time for new leadership. And really, I think Katie Porter, to me at least, is one of the smartest, one of the most fierce, I think capable elected officials. And I can't think of anyone better than Katie Porter to represent the state of California. So I am very excited about her candidacy. I think all of us should find a lot of comfort knowing that someone like Katie Porter is running for office, and I think has a really good shot of winning. She's someone who I think is relatable, who I think is personable, who I think really tries to understand people. I mean, you saw just kind of her background back in, when she first ran for office as just a working mother who tries to pay, the bills, and someone who I think really understands what people are going through and tries to listen to people. And I think that's the type of leadership and the type of person that the Democratic Party needs more than ever before. So I think we should all find some good news in Katie Porter's running for the U.S. Senate and support it in any way possible. The next good news is my home state, Illinois, actually passed a new gun reform bill, at least in the U.S. Senate. And so it was spearheaded by a couple of people who I know, including Representative Bob Morgan, who, if you're in Illinois and if you are living in the Northbrook area, he represents you. But it's really, really good news. I mean, it's a really amazing bill called the Protect Illinois Communities Act. And basically what it would do is it would it's a basically sweeping gun reform package that Shannon Watts, as well as Mom Demand Action, really pushed to the forefront. And it would ban assault weapon rifles, which is, I'm shocked that I'm even saying that still exists, but it would ban assault weapon rifles and high capacity magazines, address gun trafficking and close dangerous loopholes. And so that passed the Illinois Senate yesterday, and it's now moving on to the Illinois House, where it's expected to pass. And so that's one of the most progressive and I think much needed gun reform legislation bills that have passed so far across the country. And we're going to see that hopefully pass in the House and then get signed by the newly elected, sworn in Governor J.B. Pritzker in the coming weeks ahead. But I think that's really good news. And I think reinforces the fact that down ballot races matter. We need to protect our state legislatures, because those are the chambers that are really going to, I think, have an immediate impact on our lives, but also address some of the issues that other Republican states might not. And so as we head into 2024, I think it's really important for all of us to pay attention to those down ballot races. And I imagine that a lot of younger people are going to run for office come 2024, maybe Illinois state legislatures, maybe different state legislatures across the country. I think we're going to see a lot of fresh new voices come 2024. And I think it's on all of us to pay attention to who's running and to actually vote for those down ballot races, because they couldn't be more important. Some other news that we saw in Brazil. So as I told you guys yesterday, on Sunday, a bunch of people who supported the former president stormed the Capitol and really just desecrated it, mirroring a lot of January 6th. And yesterday, more than 1,000 people were detained. I mean, you think about the pace at which justice is happening in Brazil, and I think the lack of pace at which justice is happening here. I mean, we've had some progress, but it pales in comparison to what's happening in Brazil. They're really cracking down. And I think that's how, we're going to have on Ruth Ben-Gia on Friday to talk about, what this all means and kind of what we can learn from how Brazil is responding to this. Because I think, the biggest thing and the most important thing when you have something like a coup is to respond to it aggressively and forcefully and in real time. And so I think it'll be interesting to talk about that come Friday, and hopefully you guys don't miss that. On a lighter note, today is the launch of Prince Harry's new book called Spare, which is a really savage title, and I'm sure all of us have seen the promotional videos and all of his interviews on CNN and on other channels like 60 Minutes, and he's really going on the airwaves and talking about his perspective as a former member of the British royal family, and kind of what his experience was like with Meghan, who is Black and who really got a lot of vicious treatment from the tabloids. And so, if you have ordered that book, let me know what you think. I might get it. It's a pretty long book, but it's a nice biography, apparently autobiography of Prince Harry and his life in the British royal family. And so, should be interesting. I've heard some interesting stuff, and there's been some interesting leaks from the Guardian and other British tabloids. And so, we should all, I think, maybe find some nice reading in there if that suits you. So that's all the news I have today, and we will be back tomorrow for another episode of On the Move. Just a quick programming note: on Thursday, we're going to be having on DNC Chair Jamie Harrison, who is going to be talking about what Democrats are doing ahead of 2024 and how they plan to govern in both the Senate and the House, and what some of their priorities are. And so I think we're going to see a stark contrast to what we've been talking about for the last 2 days with the Republican Party and what they're trying to do, and instead focusing on some of the good things that Democrats are doing, which I think is a lot. And so Jamie Harrison will be joining me on Thursday. On Friday, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who is a fascist expert and really talks a lot about this growing right-wing shift. She's going to be talking about Brazil and some of the things that are happening right here at home. You don't want to miss that. We'll be back every day at 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Eastern time, right here on youtube.com/Politicon. Be sure not to miss an episode. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of On the Move, and have a great rest of your day.